All right, everybody. So here we are. We're going to be in Exodus 21 and starting in 24. Tanya, we've already read about the Ten Commandments. And we covered that kind of in two parts just a couple weeks ago. And now, Pam, we're getting into the other parts of the law that a lot of people don't talk about and that we don't read about. And Jesus, he told his disciples over there, he said, you think I come, he told the Pharisees and his disciples over there, he said, you think I come to destroy the law? He said, I didn't come to destroy it. He said, I come to fulfill the law. So he was one, when we read about these 618 laws, he was the one, Cindy, who lived perfectly, lived them all. And it tells us that there's going to be judgment for those, Milford, that haven't accepted Jesus. And the thing they're going to be judged against is God's law. Because it was built in a way that nobody could live it perfect. And it was always, Jimmy, to point towards the Savior. And so we read about the Ten Commandments, and we've read laws about servants. We read about laws about murder. We've read about laws about property, and now we're going to get into some more of that. And folks, Brenda, Moses hasn't even. This is something I think that we're missing here. The congregation of Israel is still standing around the bottom of Mount Sinai. Cindy, Moses has went a little ways up, and God is talking to everybody. So they all heard the Ten Commandments, but all of this they heard too. So we're not even to the point, Judy, where Moses enters up into the mountain to get the specific, some specific things that God tells him about worship. The people hear all of this, okay? So they're still all listening while God's talking about all this. Anybody comments, questions before we get into the lesson here? So here we read about the laws about murder and the laws about trauma. And in 24 it starts out, and this is where we hear this phrase repeated a lot. And it says, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So Gwen, and I know we covered this last week, but all that means is that if I was to call something on Jason, and so Jason, if I did something, if we got in an argument and I killed you, under the law you're supposed to kill me. But it tells ways to do that. If I maimed you and took your hand, and they had to amputate your hand, that means that you're supposed to amputate mine. Everything's supposed to be equal. And Tanya, what it all points to, the laws about servants, the laws about this, is because under God's eyes, everybody's equal. Okay? Everybody's equal. And the thing about murder is that, Tanya, is that I feel like my life means more, is more valuable than yours. Okay? When, Jimmy, your property, about coveting, I feel like my desire for your ox, for your donkey, for your house, for whatever you've got, is greater than your possession of it. So it's all about making sure that everyone realizes that you're all the same. It doesn't matter how much or how little you have, you're all the same. Okay? Anybody comments, questions? It says, 26, and if a man smite the eye of his servant, or the eye of his maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth, or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. So, and we talked about this, and I know we're covering some ground that we already covered. So this goes into the laws about servants, Milford. So if you had bought a servant, and there were laws and conditions, Judy, about how you were supposed to treat that servant. But if they did something wrong and you got so mad at them that you smote them hard enough that you put out their eye, or that you put out their teeth, you were supposed to let them go free for that injury. They didn't have to buy their freedom. They didn't have to do anything. They're supposed to go free. All right? So that's all stuff we covered. And now 28. Now we get into, because folks, they had farm animals back then. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Milford.
Okay, it says eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth.
Yeah.
Let me read you this. You have heard that it had been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not the evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on the right hand cheek, turn to him the other.
Yeah.
And if a man will surely do thee at law, then take away the coat, let him have the clothes also.
Yeah.
That means good.
Yeah.
That's our
Yeah.
new law.
Yeah, and that was what was so different is
Jesus said that.
no, you guys are fine. Hey, we can talk this out. Is that was what was so different, Pam? Whenever what you're going to see is we talk about how the Pharisees followed the law. And Jim, what we actually find is not only did the Pharisees follow the law, they knew it frontwards, backwards, upside down, everything. Not only did they follow the law, but they had also added to it a lot. But still, Jimmy, they could understand, like when, because it tells here in the law, which we're going to read here in a couple chapters, it says, if your ox was to fall in a ditch on the Sabbath, you're allowed to pull your ox out.
Yeah.
Okay?
But don't put it there on purpose.
Yeah, I know, but they could understand that.
Yeah.
But when Jesus came through, Cindy, and he healed somebody on the Sabbath, they said, you're not allowed to do any work on the Sabbath. He said, if your ox was in the ditch and you pulled it out, why can't you do good to your brothers and sisters on the Sabbath day?
He healed on Sabbath.
Yeah, and so what it comes down to is that there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. The Pharisees, if it didn't say it, you couldn't do it. But the thing about Jim, and we'll get down further here into the reading, is when God set this up, well, it's like we were talking about the adultery part, and it was like, is that one of those things that some of that stuff did God, he doesn't say anything about it, but it's like, but did he have to? You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing with helping your neighbor. Give me just a second. With helping your neighbor, like Jim is, that was just kind of understood that like, well, of course, if I have to get my ox out, well, if I see that Jim Bowman needs help changing his tire on Sunday or helping or anything I could do to help Jim on a Sabbath day, I'm allowed to do that. But the Pharisees were so strict, Judy, that they thought, if it doesn't say that you can't do it or you can do it, don't do it. Okay? So that was the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So I just want to finish my thought there before you said anything.
The Lord came and changed the Mosaic law.
That's right.
That's the reason why that these laws that we are now reading about, we're no longer subject unto, because Jesus, these laws that we're studying about were annual laws. Their sacrifice was once a year. The Lord came and he wrote 2 new commandments unto us that takes the place of all these laws that we're studying about. And what Milford read about is what Jesus said. Now this is changed. It's no longer an eye for an eye, nor a tooth for a tooth.
Yeah.
We're now living under His law.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's what you're talking about, the difference between the spirit and the letter.
Yeah, and that's the and what you see is that, like Jesus told his disciples, he said it's just better to go ahead and agree with your adversary. And I know that we ought to stand firm on things, and we ought to stand firm on our doctrine and things that we believe here in the church. But Jimmy, on a lot of earthly stuff, does it matter to God? No. I mean, it don't. If you and I have an argument, I mean, and we're not arguing about something like the doctrine that the church is founded on. If we're just arguing about you scrape the side of my truck or whatever, does God? I mean, at the end of the day, does He really care? But the thing is,
I don't think He cares about the truck. But
well,
I think He cares about
he
you
does
act in a Christian manner.
He does, and that's the point that I'm trying to get to here, and we'll continue on down the reading because hang on just a second. But Because he would rather, as a Christian, again, changing about the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, he would rather me say, Jimmy, yeah, you scrape my truck, it's okay. My insurance will pay for it. Rather than me and you get out there and get in an argument, and I take a hammer and I go bam, and I say, I'm just going to make you pay for a taillight while I'm at it. That's the eye for a tooth. Where Jesus said, look, if it happens, it happens. Okay? Look, go ahead, Pastor. I didn't want to...
I don't remember what it was.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to cut you off. I just want to get to the end of that point. Anybody else comments, questions?
But Moses' law, God came and he rewrote those 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments are schoolmaster, and if we keep the 2 commandments he told us to keep, we'd keep those also.
That's what it all comes back to, is those 2 right there.
Okay.
All comes to this. He said all of the law and the prophets. So those 10 up there, the 618 that we're reading about. Jimmy, if I love the Lord with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, I'll do what He's asked. I'll worship Him in a proper way. And Milford, if I love my neighbor as I love myself, I won't want to get in an argument with you over something like my vehicle getting messed up. If I love you like I'm supposed to, I won't want to argue with you. I won't want to for there to be anything between us. Okay?
There's just only, 4 or 5 of them laws in the New Testament. Right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well, I had a question.
Okay.
Ask me, and I'll ask y'all. See what everybody's opinion is. Is the 10 Commandments holding the church back now?
that just seems like I don't.
And the person pointed out, he said, if you go and look, most of the people come into the church and we got the 10 Commandments hanging up there. They'll look at the 10 Commandments and they say, well, I kept that one, I kept that one, I kept that one, I kept that one, that one. I'm all right.
Well, there was also someone who came to Jesus and said he did the same thing.
Oh, yeah. But once they that's members. I'm talking about members of the church.
It ain't holding me back because I'm able to rightly divide it and tell what's what.
Well,
yeah, but how many lay members can do that?
Well,
that's what I'm asking.
Here.
So it's holding the Spirit back.
Okay. So we're actually in a good conversation. Okay, this is good. I didn't know this is where this was going. This is good, and I do have some. I'm hoping we'll get to it tonight in this chapter. So again, that's the divide between the Spirit and the letter.
Yeah.
Because Jesus told them, that same place that Milford read, He said, you heard in old times, He said, thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, yeah, it says it right there. And He said, but any man, He said, that looks on a woman and lusts after her, He said, has already committed adultery. And so, you're making a good point. So the difference between the letter and the spirit of the law, yeah, there's a fine line of discernment, like Jim was talking about. There's a line of discernment there, because, okay, since I brought up about thou shalt not commit adultery, have I committed adultery on Leanne on the letter of the law? No, I've not. But now, Pam, if I look at a pretty woman and I think, well, I wouldn't care to have her versus her, I have. That's the difference. And so this is all wrapped up in the same thing, the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Because again, your ox falls in the ditch, you're allowed to get it out. Well, if your neighbor falls in the ditch, well, of course, he's not an ox, but of course you would help your neighbor. Same thing. Well, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery, so that means that I ought to only have eyes for her. When it talks about covetousness, we all talked about that. We all had trouble with that one. Remember a couple of weeks ago? We all said we all had trouble with covetousness. But again, the difference between the letter and the spirit is, I might say, well, no, I've not committed adultery, but if you really look at it, it's like, have I?
But
Maybe.
it's,
And, go ahead.
it's not, that should have nothing to do with us with a worship service. The Lord said, I am a spirit, and I seek as such to worship him in spirit and truth. That picture over there, those 10 commandments, that church covenant, should have no part, not to even be worried about in a worship service.
I agree with you.
You truly come in the spirit that you're supposed to come into. The building itself is not supposed to make a difference.
That's what I'm saying. It's the people
So-
that in this building that are going to worship God in spirit and in truth.
So, again, the difference between the letter and the spirit.
Yeah.
You know, it's having that discernment of understanding of, rather than, and I see what you were bringing up. I do.
It's the mindset.
It's the mindset. It's almost like sometimes, how many of us have ever thought, Jim, how close can I stand to the stove and not get burned? Jason, one time, Mom's and Dad's house, they had a wood stove, and I it was a cold winter morning. I was standing down there in my pajamas, and it was feeling so good, and I just kept getting closer, and all of a sudden, Pam, I felt something real hot on the back of my leg. It burned a hole in my pants. I got 3 pairs of pajama pants that year for Christmas. Leanne got me one, Sarah got me one, I think Mom got me one. I don't know. Everybody, you remember that? Everybody got me pajama pants. And again, and I'm not trying to get too deep in the weeds here, but that's the difference between the letter and the spirit, is because, like, when it says to not commit adultery or not kill, like he said, because Jesus says this a little bit later on in the same place Milford was reading. He said, you've heard it old times, thou shalt not kill. But if you have a grudge, Brenda, against somebody, you've murdered them.
Well, what if you're talking about them?
And so that's the difference between the letter and the spirit. So
You
it would
kill them
be,
with your tongue.
it would be, rather than us as whoever, Christians or whoever, saying, well, you know, I've not killed nobody. Have you talked about your neighbor?
Is there
That's
any?
the difference between the letter and the spirit.
Yeah, till you kill influence.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. So that's the difference between the letter and the spirit, and that's why I think that's why I'm enjoying reading all this, Jimmy's, because we get to see when the Pharisees would come up against Jesus and they'd say, well, here's what the law says to do. He'd say, well, what did God want? What was God's plan?
But if you
And we're
come
getting to see
in
that.
and you're looking for a reason to condone your lifestyle.
Yeah.
No matter if it's
Yeah.
a good lifestyle, bad lifestyle, right, middle.
Yeah.
If you're coming in and all you're looking for is a reason to condone the way
Yeah.
you live,
Yeah.
your heart's not right.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, have you what you were talking about? You know, Jesus had a young guy came to him and said, "Lord, I will follow you wherever you go." And he said, "Have you kept the commandments? Have you kept the law?" It wasn't just the 10 Commandments. He said, "I've kept all of it. I have kept every single one." And Jesus said, "Okay." He said, "But there's one thing." He said, "Go and sell. Go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and then you come and follow me." And the thing that was the difference between the letter and the spirit was the love. Again, Cindy, they could understand. If my ox is in the ditch, I can get it out. But they couldn't understand. They couldn't fathom that love that we have now, Jimmy, where if you fall in the ditch, I'm supposed to pull you out. Okay? They couldn't fathom that. So he didn't have the love for his neighbor. He didn't, like, love thy neighbor as thyself. Did he keep that one? No, he didn't. All right. I think we've talked about the difference between the letter and the spirit.
I want to bring up one more thing. I had a conversation today about the law. This guy's supposed to be a preacher, but when he says they asked him to come and speak at these churches, but he's supposed to be a preacher. And he brought up the law, and he said that Christ died for the fulfillment of the sacrifice law. And that's what he fulfilled when he died, was just a sacrifice. And I said, well, he wrote 2 new commandments. Well, where do you find 2 new commandments in the Bible? I said, Matthew's 22nd chapter, and I quoted them to him. He said, oh, yeah, you're right. I said, don't the Bible tell you that if you're indebted to part of the law, you're indebted to the whole law? I said, the law was fulfilled. And so he had to change the subject then.
And what I was talking about a while ago, Jesus said it also. He said, thou knowest thy commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not kill, do not steal, do not bear false witness, defraud not, honor thy father and mother.
Yeah. Yeah, so he brought
That's
in.
all the
Yeah.
ones that's in there.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah,
Jesus
yeah. But
simplified it all right
Yeah.
there.
That's again the difference between the letter and the spirit. That's the difference. All right, is everybody clear? I don't want nobody to go home confused. I don't want Gwen to go home and say, what were they talking about tonight? Okay, I don't want nobody to go home. Is everybody okay?
Jordan, I would say one thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to get you off.
No, go ahead.
But, there's more ways of killing somebody.
Yeah,
That's
Just go
exactly
bad.
right.
Yeah.
buddy.
And the thing about it is, I've been in the school system now about 17 years, something like that, I don't know. You'd be surprised how much it's changed. I believe, you take, if I go up and they, a lot of times they have me work on bathrooms and stuff like that, I take somebody with me.
yeah,
Not because I'm afraid of what I'm gonna do,
yeah,
but I want a witness.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And that's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad that we're like that, but thing about it is, they want stuff fixed, they want stuff done, but it's not safe. Because somebody could just say, hey, you know
Yeah.
what he did to me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He touched me,
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you didn't do nothing.
yeah,
You don't got to do anything.
yeah.
But people will take that and they'll bury you with it.
And I was thinking too, that you was mentioning about committing adultery. There's several different ways of committing adultery, ain't there?
Yeah,
Spiritual adultery.
yeah,
But we can go right back to that right there. Right there, it simplifies it. If we can just do them two,
yeah.
that'll take care of everything more.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the discernment is the difference between the letter and the spirit. All right, anybody else?
I never had heard anybody ever say what you said that guy said about the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, that's a big argument, a lot of places. Those people still, I'm trying to get off this, but right fast. But, Apostle Paul had that problem himself. And that's the reason why he said you're laying undue burdens
Yeah.
upon these people. Because you're trying to live by the law, the letter of the law, rather than the spirit that God gave us. And he had that problem. And you read down through the New Testament, you'll find out they have that problem because they was leaning to the law, looking to the law. And Jesus said, we're no longer under that. You're under the grace plan. You're not under that law that you have to kill an ox or whatever once a year. You don't have to offer that kind of sacrifice. I done sacrifice for you. So, just like we'll study part of that law, but circumcision law. Just like that. There's a difference in the new one and the old.
All right, anybody else? I'd like to, let's try to get to the end of this chapter, and I appreciate all the comments and the discussion we've had. I don't want y'all to, and folks, sometimes we need to get derailed a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. But anybody else, as far as the difference between the letter and the spirit, and the change that happened when Jesus set up everything, when he told us the new commandments, anybody comments, questions, anything else about that?
Did you really realize how many people getting killed in churches this day and time? I mean, not physically, but spiritually. I mean, that's just like these new churches, just repeat after me stuff and all that. All they're doing is killing people that do that.
All right. It says here in 28, it says, now we get to what happens when an animal hurts somebody. What happens if you have a farm animal? Jim, what happens if you have a farm animal and it hurts somebody? Because there's got to be restitution made for that. There's got to be rules about that. And God, here's what God said. 28, it says, and if an ox gore a man or a woman, that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall be quit, which means acquitted. That's the same word, Pam, that they use in trial. When you're found innocent of something, they say you were acquitted at trial. Same word. So if you had an ox, if Jim had an ox and it accidentally killed somebody, and they went and they stoned the ox, is what they were supposed to do. You couldn't slit its throat, you couldn't pierce it with arrows, you were supposed to stone it. It said you couldn't eat it because it's unclean, because it killed somebody. It said, then the owner's free. The owner, you can't lay anything to his charge. You can't come through and say, no, now Jim, we killed your ox, and now we got to do something to you. No, you're not allowed to do that. And it says here, in 29, but if the ox were wont, which means if it was able, if it had done it before, it said, were wont to push with his horn in time past, meaning he had hurt people before. Pam, maybe the animal, you went and worked with it, and it acted in a way, and it tried to hurt you, or it was kind of wild, and it almost hurt you, almost killed you. But it said if it was wont to push it with his horn in time past, and it had been testified to his owner. So, Jim, if it's okay to use you as an example, I come to you, I said, hey, look, Pam was working with your ox, and it tried to hurt her. It said, and he hath not kept him in, which means kept it pinned up, but that he hath killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. So the choices you make, that's the same thing, Pam, through all this, is the choices we make have consequences. So making sure, if you had a farm animal and it did try to hurt somebody, it was your job to put it up. Because if it did kill somebody, then you're liable for that too. All right? So, 30. If there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. So, and this is saying, instead of him giving his life. So,
He can buy
if
freedom.
the survivors, if the family, if they agreed. So, Cindy, if something happened to one of your loved ones with Jim's ox, and you said, look, you pay us, $1,000, you pay us some money, and that'll help us. And then it was settled. Okay? But he couldn't give money and then be stoned. It was one or the other. If he thought it was, if Jim thought good enough, like, I could pay to keep my life, then he could.
But it's just like if your dogs were bothering me, and I went and reported it to you, and you knew it, and then you continued to let them run loose and bother me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The owner's responsible.
Yeah.
If anything they destroy, he's responsible once they've been warned.
Yeah.
That's the same thing here.
Yeah. So 31, and this goes along with 29 and 30. 31 says, whether he hath gored a son or hath gored a daughter, such means it doesn't matter if it's man or woman. It said, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. Okay? So it doesn't matter what's happened. Because some laws, we've already seen it, Brenda, that sometimes, like with the maid servants, we saw where they couldn't go out like the men servants did. They were treated a little different, So we see that. But this is saying, look, it doesn't matter if it happens to a son or daughter, man or woman, whoever. If the ox hurts somebody, if it kills somebody, these are the rules that you have to do. And then, now what happens, Tanya, if it's a servant, if it's someone that you bought to work for you? And we already talked about the laws about servants. This was the part I really wanted to get to. It says 32, it says, if the ox shall push a manservant or maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So 32, and we're going to pause right here at 32. just for a second. It says, again, if an ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, so that's someone that you've bought. Someone, we talked about it last week, about maybe people got into debt, maybe someone did this or that, and they had to sell a family member or something to get them out of debt. If you bought a servant, Milford, to work for you, and that ox hurt that maidservant or that manservant, here's what it says. It says that the owner of the ox, now this isn't killed, this is just if they hurt one of your servants, Jimmy, was supposed to give the owner 30 shekels of silver. Now, where does 30 shekels of silver come up again? We talked about the New Testament, so where's that familiar to us? Anybody?
The piece of silver it was sold for?
Yeah. So, Cindy, Judas sold Jesus for 30 shekels, 30 pieces of silver. Now, what's that 30 pieces of silver? Jimmy, that servant wasn't worth that 30 pieces of silver because they're hurt now. That was kind of the workman's comp, okay, that you paid to buy that servant, since they can't use their labor anymore. So the owner was supposed to give, the owner of the ox was supposed to give to the owner of the servant 30 pieces of silver. So that means, Brenda, that Judas sold Jesus for the price of a servant who was maimed and hurt. It wasn't a lot of money. Just a little bit. And I've heard a lot of people say this, and this is what I thought was so interesting when I first saw this, when I first found this out. But Milford, I've heard people say before, over, again, talking about the crucifixion and all, they said, well, man, that 30 pieces of silver, that must have been a lot of money. Did you look here? That's not very much money, Jimmy. That's not very much money. Judas, Jim, traded Jesus for little to nothing. I mean, pocket change, I guess, is basically what you could say. For the price of a servant who had got hurt by a farm animal. Not killed, but had gotten hurt by a farm animal. So, anybody, any comments or questions so far?
Well, we sell him out for a whole lot less than that.
We do. Yeah, a whole lot less. We do. But I don't know. I mean, that makes you look at. It made me look at the crucifixion a little differently. It makes me look at the Judas's role, Jason, in the crucifixion a little differently. I mean, that he didn't sell him for $1 million. He didn't sell him for $100,000. He sold him for 30 pieces of silver.
Well,
just the price.
The value of ox.
Yeah. Of a servant who's useless now. Yeah, of a servant who's useless now.
Well, you knew it wasn't much money, if you think about it, because when he offered to take it back, they wasn't worried about it. If it was a lot of money, they would have took it back.
I sort of say technically, he
Actually,
did it for nothing because he gave the money back.
Yeah. Good point.
How many pieces of silver did Joseph get sold for?
I don't know if it says.
It says, yeah.
Does it?
20 or 30.
Someone finds that. That'd be over in Genesis. Wait, right here. I turn right to it. It says, certain man found him, wandered in the field, asked, what seekest thou? Seek my brethren, I pray. Passed by Midianites, they drew Joseph. 20 pieces. Yeah, he was sold for 20 pieces of silver.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Less than that.
Yeah,
Less than that. Yeah.
He didn't even get what a servant.
No, and when I say servant, I try to emphasize, Brenda, that it's not even a able-bodied, he's healthy or she's healthy servant. It's someone who got hurt and they can't work anymore. I mean, Tanya, it's like I said, I'm not getting in nobody's business, but I mean, if you've ever been on unemployment or workman's comp or anything, you know it doesn't pay your whole salary. It only pays a portion of the salary.
66.6%.
Yeah, 66.
Oh, I just have a question from my own learning. Who was it back then kept up with all this stuff?
Of what, the laws and all
Yeah,
that?
all this. Yeah.
Well, that's when we go back to the book we read, we started Bible study with, that's the Judges. because it tells us a little bit later about the judges and the elders of the city, and that they're the ones, when there's arguments and disagreements, they're the ones that take care of that.
You know, Moses tried to take care of that, all of that himself. And his daddy-in-law told him
Yeah.
he wasn't able to do it. All
Yeah.
he needed to
Yeah, yeah,
spread it out.
yeah. Well, and it was the judges, supposed to be, you know. And of course, Brenda, what did we find out in the book of Judges? Are they following all this?
No.
No.
But that's what leads up to the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else comments, questions? So, I wanted to get to that verse, and I just wanted to just point out that here's one place already in the law of Milford where you have a shadow of Jesus. Okay, you have a prophecy of Jesus. Okay, of what the transaction is going to be, during his crucifixion. So, I wanted to just talk about that for just a second. So, now, it talks about, I really like that point, Cindy. He's like, he did it for nothing because he got his money back. I like that. Well, what you said, and really, just real quick, just your point, Jimmy, what you said about, well, they weren't worried about it because they didn't take the money back. Actually, they couldn't take it back because it was the price for a life. It says it's the price of blood, and it was unclean, and they couldn't put it in the treasury. And so that's why they bought the field, to bury strangers in, is because the money,
Polluted.
polluted, where it's used for a murder, basically, is
Stained
unclean.
with blood.
Yeah,
So the person who bought the field off of, he took tainted money.
yeah. It gets so deep, don't it? Yeah, it just, I know, and the thing is, it only gives us so much, but yeah, you just get deeper and deeper and deeper. So let's finish up this chapter. We've got about 10 minutes. It says here in 33, it says, and if a man open a pit, or if he shall dig a pit, and not cover it, and an ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good, and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. So if Milford's digging a well on his property, he's digging a ditch, he needs to dig this big hole, he's digging a cellar. And he gets done for the day, throws his shovel down, goes to the house, and he doesn't cover up the hole. If an animal falls in there, because he didn't cover up the hole, he's supposed to pay for the animal, and that animal's his. Mm-hmm. He bought it because it ended up in his hole, and they can't get it out. So, and it says, 35.
Is that animal now clean to?
It don't say. It would. I think so, because when it expressly says that you don't eat it, is where you're definitely don't. That it's at the bottom. If it's at the bottom of your well, it's like,
But
what do you?
But
what
this
do you-
animal
but-
is not eligible for sacrifice.
No.
Because you can't offer
no.
up a halt or a man.
No. 35. And here's kind of where that goes along, kind of what you were asking, Cindy. It says, and if one man's ox hurt another's. So these two animals, they're getting a fight, whatever. Yeah, they hurt one another. It said, they shall sell the live ox and divide the money. And the dead ox also they shall divide. And so that means that,
They eat it.
yeah. There's just some, there's some steak. Okay, you each get some steak.
Fight until one of them was dead.
Pretty much. I mean, they don't let them, but
They might not have been around.
they
Well, I mean, if they was around, they started fighting.
Well,
Well, I think this is just accidents.
I mean,
I don't
But
think it was
are you-
intentional.
look at it this way: are you going to try to stop two bulls from fighting?
and
Absolutely
No.
not.
Well, you'd be surprised if some of them tried to.
That was so
But-
funny.
but it says.
That was so funny.
It says, if one's ox hurt another, that he die. It said, they shall sell the live ox and divide the money, and the dead ox they shall divide. So when they sell the live ox, they get $50, they each get $25, and then the dead ox they're allowed to divide it and eat it. It says 36, but again, there's a condition here. It says, It says, or if it be known that the ox hath used a push in times past, and his owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. So,
You can buy ox to the,
yeah. If your animal hurts you, you're supposed to pay. You're supposed to pay for that, and then that dead ox is yours. So, and it gets pretty deep. I know that we could.
That's speculate. That's really speculation, though. That's saying that your ox was the one that won. If yours is the one, they ain't no contingent. If yours is the one that had been warned of,
but I mean, if that
You have
ox
to go
has
back
to
to
have a
the other one.
history. That ox has to have a history, and that owner has to have known that
Yeah,
history.
yeah.
In order for that to be.
Well, and
In other words, you have to have a
had to
witness
have
come up
that
and says, I
incident
told you
before.
that ox was gonna hurt that.
and now, do you see the importance of thou shalt not bear false witness? I mean, Tanya, you better not get out and say that my ox did something wrong when it didn't. Oh, yeah, I mean, because now here we're like, well, wait, you got to have witness, And folks, here's the thing that I think is important to remember is, and we'll pick up the next chapter next week. We'll finish a little early. These laws were not written for an area of land, Pam, the size of the United States of America. Okay? It was written for an area of land that's approximately the size of New England. Maine, Delaware, New Hampshire, Vermont, that area. Massachusetts. You've been up there.
yeah.
It don't take very long to drive from state to state, does it? Rhode Island, lady, come in, she worked with us. She's from Rhode Island. She said, I can drive across the state of Rhode Island in 30 minutes. I said, I drive to work every day, 30 minutes.
I drove an hour and a half.
So, yeah, I know. I'm just, saying about the size difference. So, when you have these laws, Jim, it's important because you have people around you who are witnesses. The community's watching. The community, Cindy, is watching. The community's supposed to help each other. Okay? And we see that a lot. You're supposed to have judges, again, like we talked about when Jim asked, Milford, you're supposed to have judges who kind of keep track of some of this stuff that's happened so that they know how to make a good judgment. But of course, the thing is, we learn once they get to the promised land, they're not keeping any of this. But that's the idea, is that the community, Milford, helps each other, takes care of each other. They're all watching. They all know what's going on. And, well, it's hoping for the best. They're hoping that people are telling the truth. And at the end of the day, God knows whether the people are or not. And you might get away, Jim. You might lie on me with my animal hurt you or whatever, and you might lie on me. But God's going to know. And you might pull something on me down here, but God will know.
I was thinking when I was a kid, Larry, they was a whole bunch of men that just went around buying stock off of people, and they had a code, with one another. Sometimes they'd rebuy this back and forth, and they knowed about these animals. Each one that traded in this stock, they knowed this. And don't you imagine back in them days, why,
They knew if
they knew stuff about different
it
things.
was hard to ride. They
Yeah,
Yeah.
knew O.H. Trammell.
yeah, my uncle.
Yeah.
He traveled all the time. He always, there's a couple more, I forget their names, that we used to
But
deal
don't
with.
you think they trusted?
Marshall Webb, and Wilbert Davis, some different ones traded stock.
If
Clarence
they
Jones.
trusted one another back then, handshake meant something.
We got
Whatever
it,
they
dog.
said people believe. It ain't like this day and time, most stuff comes out people's mouths a lot.
It was hard to sell something that wouldn't work, like a team of horses or a mule. But if it worked, buddy, that was a thing to have, But if it had a certain thing that it done that wasn't too good, people knowed it back in them days. They'd tell it,
They had a bull and they both entered that thing run through a 5-strand barbed wire fence and break it. And we'd have to go over to the neighbors and get it out of his cows.
But the thing it comes down to is, through all of this, is yourself, is your personal choice. And again,
You've got responsibility for whatever you're taking care of too.
yeah.
exactly.
But going off of, the 2 commandments is that, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind and strength. And it says, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And I can't control, Tanya, I can't control what you do. Daddy, I can't control what you do. Milford, I can't control what you do, but I can control what I do. Okay? And that's the thing about reading the law, and like what you were talking about, Jim, people trading stock and knowing this and that about it, but about the thing about honesty, the thing about that at the end of the day, when I lay down on the bed at night, I may have pulled the wool over everybody's eyes, Judy. I may even pull the wool over her eyes. But there's somebody up there I can't hide anything from.
Right.
And that's what this law is showing us, okay? He's trying to give a guideline about how you're supposed to handle things with your neighbor, how you're supposed to handle farm animals, how you're supposed to handle servants, how you're supposed to handle this and that. But he's letting you know that I'm always there watching. And when you don't do it my way, there's consequences. And anyway, Larry, I'll turn it back over to you.